welcome back to Digging into the Bible. This week we're taking a look at Genesis chapter 15 and the establishment of a covenant between God and Abram. Look at verse 1. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward will be great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eleazar of Damascus. This is a great question at this point. God is again coming back and he's offering the same promise that he's offered before. And before we start offering any sort of judgment to Abram and questioning, well, how can you ask such a thing? Well, think about it. He's continuing to age, he's continuing to hear this promise, and yet he's still childless. And he points to Eleazar, a servant of his, and says, that's my heir. God, what are you going to give? Because you make these promises. What are you offering? Kind of a bold thing to say, but not, I'd almost say not entirely unreasonable. And Abram said, behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, this man shall not be your heir, for your very own son shall be your heir. God's offering reassurance. And he brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars, if you are able to number them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. So Abram believes. He had a little bit of wavering, a little bit of doubt, and God, he doesn't punish him. He doesn't get on him. He says, look, I'm just going to reassure you with my promise again. And I'm going to give you another visual. We talked about the dust before, and now it's the stars. Can you even count them? Well, that's how many offspring you will have. Continuing at verse 7. And he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you up out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. But he said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? Again, rational questions. God's making these big promises, and Abram is looking for some reassurance. He said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, and a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all these and cut them in half and laid each half over against the other. But he did not cut the birds in half. And when the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Now, keep in mind, in the midst of this, what did we find out? This is God coming to Abram in a vision. This is a vision. Keep that in mind. This is a vision that God is giving to Abram and illustrating to him how his promises can be trusted. Verse 12, and the sun was going down, and a deep sleep fell on Abram. So he's receiving a vision. He's seeing this, but it must be a waking vision because he's now falling asleep in the midst of the vision. Kind of interesting combination. And behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him, and the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. If you know the story that's coming, God has just explained to Abram what will happen when his family starts to grow. And this is Abram, who has recently just come back up out of Egypt. Well, that's where his family will end up. God is telling him, giving him prophetic knowledge so that he knows what's coming for his family. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. Okay, great promise here. They're going to have a tough time, but again, the same way God has blessed Abram, and through the difficulties and the different things that have happened and God enriches him, God's going to do the same thing with his offspring, the nation that will come out of him. As for as for yourself, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. Then when the sun had gone down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Kadamites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephraimites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. God is again promising this land. And what's interesting with this vision, you have God take and he separates these animals, not the birds. He's separating the goat and the ram and so forth, and he cuts them in half. This was not an unusual thing. It was a way of marking a covenant between two parties. They would slice an animal in half and then they would walk together between it. To some degree, it's implying the idea that should one of us break this covenant, may we be split in half for having broken our covenant. But notice who passes through: smoking fire pot and a flaming torch. Abram is not the one passing through this. God himself alone passes through. The presence of the Lord passes through. And so the covenant, the understanding of this, of the covenant, is that God is promising to fulfill the covenant regardless, and promising that even though Abram and his offspring will not hold up their end of the deal, God, in a sense, is taking on both sides of the covenant and saying, I will uplift your side as well. I will honor the covenant regardless. And so God makes this promise. He is reassuring Abram the promise of the great descendants, the promise of salvation through your descendants, the promise of a land for your descendants to be a part of. These are all things that God promises yet again and gives Abram really tremendous reassurance to say, you can trust me. I, the Lord your God, you can trust me. You will see this thing through. But he's also prefiguring some things with what will happen with his descendants, that they will, yes, they will get great possessions, but they will be afflicted. They will be the servants, they will be slaves for 400 years before they're able to return and possess the land that has been promised to them. But these are all stories, all things that are coming ahead. Next week, we will jump into Genesis chapter 16, a little interaction between Sarai and Hagar. God bless. See you next week.